Okay, it says that we're live. Let me make sure on actual Facebook before we start doing this. Okay, hopefully it tells us we're live. There we are. Okay, yay. Okay, I want to make sure we're still on silent because then we'll hear everything. Okay, perfect. Yay, we are live for the first ever Infinite Woman Universe interview show. And I am here with Dalene Higgins from Elevate Finance, who is a money coach. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for being here.
You bet. I am thrilled.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. Today, we are going to get real personal with Dalene, but also she's going to talk about how to, learn to budget, pay off debt, save money, and really just be able to plan for a future that you desire, and talk about money and how all of this also relates to your business and cash flow and billing and invoicing. She's going to talk about all of it. So I'm super excited. We're going to first talk about the more personal stuff, and then we'll dive into the more technical stuff. But I'm so excited to have her. Dalene is the first ever member spotlight, which is so cool. And I'm just so excited. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. But so, hi, Angela. How are you? Hi, Flo. How are you? I'm so excited to have you guys on here. If at any time either of you or anybody else that gets on has questions for Dalene, please feel free to ask. This is for you. Not that I won't learn anything or take anything from it, but this is essentially for you. So if you have questions, surrounding your finances, budget, cash flow, any of those things, feel free to ask, okay? So we've got all of that out of the way. So Dalene, tell us how you got started being a money coach.
Okay, so about 8 months ago, I retired from my real job. I call it my real job. And retiring at my age, I knew I needed something to fill the hours of the day. So I was thinking of all the things. I'm a reader. I love to read. So I thought maybe I could go help in the schools. And so just sifting through all of the ideas that I had, and I came across the financial coaching, and they have a certification. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could do that. And that's what I was doing prior. I was a finance manager. And I thought, oh, that would be so fun to help other people, other women especially, to reach their goals, to help them with their finances there, and kind of, explain how it took me 15 years. It was not just an overnight thing. And it was, processes and going through and, all the ups and the downs. And so 8 months ago, I officially went live with my business, Elevate Finances. And as a money coach, I'm a solopreneur, and I mainly work with women. But I obviously won't exclude if it's a couple. But yeah, women are handling 85% of the day-to-day finances. And so I just feel like there's a lot of need for women to understand better what it is they're trying to do or what they're hoping to do. And if I can provide that for them and help, to them, I would love that. It just excites me. It's more than just a job. It's a service and reaching the right people that need my help. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's really powerful because women are really running the finances. You said 85%. And if women are not receiving the help that they need, how are they expected to create generational wealth? How are they expected to pass on good money habits to their children? And I know in my personal experience, I did not receive any sort of good money habits at all, right? So we've had to unlearn all of those.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that women seek help and find the right help, right? Because I know that it can be really tricky with money, but I think it's important that they find the right help that's going to be of service to them. Number one, with a woman that has run her finances, but also has a background in it. And you had mentioned that you were a money manager prior to your business. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like that's fun to share.
Yeah. So when I started, way before that, it was in the law enforcement. So I was a support personnel. I put myself through school. That's where I got my accounting degree. And eventually I found myself at the sheriff's office the last 15 years, and I was a finance manager. So I did very similar there. What I would do with women is I helped the men. There were a couple of women, but mostly men, right? And take their ideas that they had in their head. They knew how to be cops. They knew how to work the streets. They knew what they needed down in the jail, all of those things. And I just helped them interpret that into their budgets. So help them create the budgets, how to use the budgets, how to manipulate the budgets, because priority changes. And, so just like life happens for us, life happened for them. And they just needed to know how to do that. And so explaining that to them who have had no knowledge of finances, and we are doing government accounting, which is weird in a beast itself, but being able to plain talk to them, helping them. And then lots of times I just found that I had built up a rapport with them that I'd just be like, you have to trust me that this will work. Right. I know what you need, because I had grown up in it, right? So I'd been in it 17 years prior to that. And so, I knew what the functions were, and I knew all of that. And I'm like, so you just have to, believe me, at this point it will work. So I feel like if I could help, them budget and get their ideas down on paper, in a sense, I feel like women, it should be just as exciting and helpful. So I really think it has a crossover. So
yeah, definitely. And especially because you mentioned, you help them create their ideas into a reality, because you have to have a budget on some of these things that we're working with. When you're running campaigns, when you're launching something, there are budgets associated with that. Even if you're bootstrapping your business, there's still budget that goes with that. And so being able to have that in your workforce, or in your real job, like you called it, to bring it over is so important. Because I've actually I think that what you said is powerful, right? You're bringing their ideas to life with being able to create this budget and show them how it's done. And I don't think that we think of everything like that, right? We think everything is about creating, which is also important. But when you have the dollar to it, it almost brings it to life, like you mentioned. So I think that's so powerful. And it does have a huge crossover for female entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. Especially for female entrepreneurs, as we see this rise in the online industry and things like that. I want to talk about this because money is so taboo, number one, to talk about it, but it's especially taboo for women to talk about it. When you talk to women about finances and budgets and things like that, do you feel like women are hesitant to open up about what's going on in their financial experience?
Definitely. So that very first call, so all my clients, we jump on a free Q&A call, very similar to all online, right? And there is some apprehension. So I approach it very delicately and just explain to them, that I've been there, done it type of thing. And so slowly start helping them realize that I am a very logical person, right. And money does come with emotions, especially if they've reached out to me, right? They've got a lot of emotions going on. And so just breaking that down, and I stay logical, but comforting, and, trying to help them understand, like, it's okay. Whatever you feel about your situation, I'm going to see it as something that I can help you make to whatever it is you want. Right. So, they're definitely, it is hard because we don't talk about money. Right. So now you're turning to somebody, and a stranger. I mean, some of them have been people that I've known prior, but it's a stranger, and they're like, I'm supposed to talk to you about all of my money secrets, for lack of a better word. And so just building that trust and start getting it going and talking about, I just stay very logical in the very beginning. And then we work into the emotional side of it, obviously, because we all have emotions with money, good, bad, or indifferent. I think they should be there. So I have to share on that with emotion. So my daughter bought her first car. She was doing the whole process by herself because she lives out of state. And, I had helped her. We had talked about it and everything, but she's like, Mom, I was sitting there waiting for them to, get the financing and all that. And she'd done her legwork. And she goes, I was ready to chicken out. Like, I didn't know if it was right. And I said, those are all great feelings to have. That's your gut check, And so being able to talk about money, I think, is hard. And if you can't do it with the people you you know and trust and like you need to reach out to somebody, because talking about it definitely does need to happen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. This is why I feel like it was so crucial for us to have this conversation, especially in February, as people are really dealing with their taxes and stuff. So dealing with your money and your finances is like at the forefront of everybody's mind right now, because people are seeing, what am I spending my money on? What does my tax return look like? How do I get more money back from the IRS, right? Because nobody wants to pay the IRS. I mean, absolutely nobody does. And so it's like, how do I make sure that I'm spending wisely? And if I do need to pay the IRS, do I have a fund available to pay the IRS? Like, and sometimes, my mom's a real estate agent, and so if she's not paying taxes every once in a while throughout the year, she gets hit hard at the end of the year, because taxes are not coming out of her check and doing those things. So she has that set up. And so I feel like this conversation, and especially all month long, not just this one, is so important as we go into taxes and really looking at our finances right now, which I feel like everybody is doing. There's not a single day that I don't scroll where someone is talking about taxes. And I'm like, whew, money is at the forefront of everybody's mind right now. So I love that we're having this conversation. I want to ask you, get a little bit personal. How was your experience running your budget for your family and having a child and doing those things? How did that go for you?
I was thinking about that the other day, and I'm like, it's the same as everybody else, right? You take on debt to buy a house, you take on debt to purchase a car. We had motorcycles, 4-wheelers, a trailer, all the things. So during that, all my working years, we've had that. And so it was in the beginning, I think in the very beginning of life, you probably have to take on more. But I think trying to keep it less, so fewer things at a time, and just keep, the motions going, and understand the impact that will have on you, but not give up, and keep going. So then we had all the things. And then as we were getting closer to, my husband retired about 4.5 years ago. And so as we started approaching the possible age of retirement, I think we really got focused. Our daughter was raised, she'd gone to college. So we were past that phase of life. And so understand that, your phases of life, we did all the things, right? We had her in soccer, she was in band, all the normal things, the school fees, the trips we want to take her on. We did a senior trip. And so it's just all of those things. And then you hit that next phase, and it's like, okay, but I want to be comfortably retired, And so then obviously things start, we're not using the trailer as much anymore. So we sell it, we still have the motorcycles, we sold the 4-wheeler. So you just kind of start slowly downsizing. And so that is what I was able to do. And then talking about taxes, which is a windfall in a sense, because it's not continuous money that's coming in. You get it once a year. Right. I did have a couple of windfalls. We had recreational property that we sold, so I consider that a windfall. And using those effectively to help you. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's money and I need to go and, splurge on something. And I agree with that, but take a good portion of that to help you for your future self. Your future self will thank you. And that's what's hard. But yeah, it's definitely, my journey is no different than any others, kept going. My husband, I'd be like, okay, do you need to look at this? And he's like, no, you have the degree, you have the, but I think, continuing that conversation and making sure he knew this is my thoughts, but also in talking to him, because I am the numbers guru, I have all the things, but I would get so, blindsided and focused on it, and that I wouldn't see beyond that. And he did help. So, he would help, and he'd be like, well, what about this or what about that? And it would allow me that new twist on our finances to be able to keep pursuing and progressing. So
Right, right. And I feel like you brought up something really important, and that is keeping the conversation open. I know that for couples, especially, finances is like one of the biggest stressors in relationships. It's usually the most argued about scenario. How do how do women that are running the finances, how do they approach their partner when it's time to talk about finances? What's the best way to approach them?
So hopefully the assignment of handling the finances kind of was a cooperative thing,
Right.
or maybe it just fell into your lap and you're the best. Usually you're the. I talk with my sister about this all the time. Usually we're the best fit. That's why we're doing it. But then approaching your spouse, especially if it's a difficult, hopefully you already had conversations prior. So I want to touch on that first. Like, make sure you're just connecting with them. Don't make them big over, it doesn't have to be a production. I don't need to have a sit down meeting, but maybe just say, hey, this month we had this and this happen, and talk about a couple of things. And then see how they feel. Conversation could go longer or not. And then if you do have something that needs a lot more, I think it almost has to be, if you have children or other people in the home, I think you have to maybe find a spot that is quiet, that you can focus on, and just say, hey, these are the issues, and just talk through them and hopefully get them on board. So yeah, so if you haven't done that simple step before and you're now needing to make that approach, I would try to approach it not as in a defensive manner or an offensive manner. Stay neutral and just say, hey, we've got to discuss our situation, and just purport it as it's not your situation just because you've been handling it. It's not his situation. So, it is very hard. And if you're the female at home and he's working and you don't feel like you can, I don't believe that is true, right? You have a household. It's benefiting from the both of you, no matter to what extent you're contributing to it. Right. And you have kids that are going to benefit from it as well. So starting with that conversations will help even your children to be better with money.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you had very good points about just having the conversation, and that's really where it starts with, and just kind of having touch-based conversations prior to that, so that nothing is going to be like shocking, right? I mean, right. Your partner is going to know if the car has broken down, or if you needed to repair something in the house. I mean, he's obviously going to know, your partner's obviously going to know. It's not going to be shocking to them that this happened. And so now we're looking at this for our budget for the month or whatever is going on. So, and I feel like even though conversations can be so uncomfortable, those uncomfortable conversations usually are the best conversations to have, because you feel so much better after having these uncomfortable conversations. And then it makes it easier for next time. You're like, oh yeah, I did it last time. There's no reason why I can't do it this time.
Yes. No, I had a connection of mine, and he's like, me and my wife, we sit down every week and we go over everything. And I just thought, oh, like that wouldn't work for me and my husband, so it's going to look differently for everybody. But I do think that, if your spouse is not really a numbers person and doesn't want to sit down and get in the nitty gritty, that is my husband. He's like, I don't need to know the nitty gritty. I'm like, okay, but you got to hear me out, So I make it a minute or less. And so that's what it is. Yeah. And then so we had helped my sister-in-law get a home. So we were co-signed on the home. She passed. So now we have immediately an increase on our budget, demand on our budget. And so I quickly went to cash at that time. Like, we drilled down, and my daughter, I think she was like 9 or 10, because she does remember this situation. She's like, we were almost broke. I'm like, no, we weren't. Like, things were tight for a while, but together, my husband and I, because he knew his sister had died. We now have this house. So that same falls in, right? But we would work together. I said, we're going to cash, because it is very tight. We had to fix it up before we could get renters in to help offset that money. And so, it's definitely something that, hopefully your spouse or partner will be able to support you through that, especially if you're the main driver, right? and give you that. So yeah, it's easier to have discussed the little things like, hey, did you know eggs are now like $8 a carton, and
Right.
you know, that type of thing. So
Right.
keeping them in contact, you know, keeping them up to date with even something as simple as that, so that when you do have the car, but he knows it's broke, right? You can actually discuss things a lot easier. So
yeah, definitely. You brought up a good point. Your daughter thinking that you were broke, and you're like, no, things were tight. How do you approach, or how did you approach your daughter when it really came time for her to think about her finances? How did you have those conversations with her when she was younger, right? Because I know that when my daughter tells me, you know, mommy, I want this, and I'm telling her, like, we're not spending money on that. That's not in the budget. That's not what we can do. So how do you approach children? So number one, they don't pick up limiting beliefs like, you know, money doesn't grow on trees or whatever.
Yeah.
So how do we have conscious conversations with our kids around money?
So I'm going to share the example. My mom was really good about this. My dad was a government worker. Government workers don't make a lot of money. They make decent money, right? But my mom never said to me, like, we're poor, we're broke, we can't afford that. She would always on the flip side and say, like, I remember the Henley shirts were big when I was little. And I'm like, hey, Mom, we get a Henley shirt? You know, because you want to be that girl in style and all the things. And she says, hey, I think we can find one that looks just the same, and it'll be a little bit, you know, inexpensive. And I'm like, okay. I was that child too, though. That was fine. And so with my daughter, I just started sharing what I felt comfortable in sharing with her. You know, not all the nitty gritty, but like when we were doing those cash envelopes. So she must have been older because she was in band, and she came home and she's like, I need $150 tomorrow for band. I'm like, oh, like things were tight, right? We're in this cash envelope thing. So I had her sit down with me. I said, let's go to the envelopes. She knew where the envelopes were. She knew that's where we got the cash. She knew they had amounts in them for each thing. So we sat down, and I would pull out the cash, and on it I had the minimum amount in it. So I went through all the envelopes, put the minimum amounts back in, and left with a stack of money. And I counted out $150. There was a little bit more, and I said, here's your money. So that was just an example in how it worked. But then when she headed off to college, obviously, and she was a state away, I said, okay, the very beginning, the very first year, you're responsible for your fun and your entertainment. Right. I don't want you to starve as a student, and I'm paying for your gas because you're going to come home and see me. So that's how it started, you know. And then the second year of college, I'm like, okay, you get a choice. Do you want to pay for your clothing, or do you want to pay for your gas home? And so that was how I just, you know, kind of slowly like weaned her off. But it was that, and then helping her budget. And so with this car, she had been planning since November. And so I just explained the purchase process and how she knew to find a good deal. She wanted a specific car. That was the problem. So I'm like, you'll find out whether you can get it. So she ended up with one that's just about 3 years old, but she was even looking at, you know, like 6 and 7 years old. I'm like, you'll find the best value somewhere in there. Right. And so she learned that whole new process this time. So it's just every little step with them. But yeah, and then even going back to prior to the cash thing was both me and my husband worked. That was back when you had to buy your music at the store. So what? He'd be like, I want a CD. And I'm like, okay, I do too. And then only the one child, she's like, well, what do I get? Right. So I instigated an allowance because then it was up to her. And so sometimes she'd be like, Mom, I want that. And I'm like, well, you have an allowance. She's like, yeah, I don't want to pay for it. So that started immediately there, you know, teaching her like what she wanted to spend her money on. Right. So right. Yeah. I love those conversations that you've had with your daughter. I know that when I bought my first car, it was like a hunk of junk, and it was like $1,300. And I was so excited about it because it was like the first car that I had ever paid for. I had paid cash for it. Awesome. And like the side mirror was missing and stuff. And so my dad came down from Idaho to like fix it and put all the parts in it because he does those things. And then I remember the first time I financed a car,
I got it repoed because I was terrible with my money. And so then I like after that, I learned how to like deal with my money. And I was really young. I was like 19.
Wow.
And so then I learned how to deal with it and do that. And then I went and bought my second car, which was a Bug. And I think it was a 2009 or something like that. And it was a good little car. And it was right when I had like rebuilt my financial life. I had like restarted my whole financial life, and I was paying everything with cash. I did everything with cash because I was better with cash. I'm better with cash now. I know that about myself. And I would go in to make those payments. And I think the payments were like $330 or something. And I was giving them $400 in cash every single time. I was like, I don't want this payment anymore, or take it away from me.
Yes.
And I was paying like 18% interest or whatever. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
And then I made the payment on time and more for like a year, and then refinanced with Navy Federal. And then I got it down to like 8%. And then I was so excited because I paid off the car and then got pregnant. And then I had to get a new car because the car seat was not fitting in the back seat. Like I had a detachable car seat and was seriously like I felt like I was throwing her in there. And I was like, I paid this off. I don't want a new car.
Yep. Oh my gosh. It's so true. Life happens. Life happens.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Floretta says, woo, I needed to hear this because I don't like to tell my kids there isn't enough or we're broke, because growing up, I always heard this. And because of this, I created blocks when it comes to money. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. Telling your children that we're broke, that we don't have enough money, that, you know, we need money for that, or we need we need money. I feel like it's the hardest thing to navigate around, but it's also one of the worst things that we can tell our children. And so because number one, they have no concept of money. They just don't understand what that means at all. And then telling them that we're broke creates things like these blocks that we see as female entrepreneurs and stuff like that. When you work with women, how do you help them navigate those blocks?
So the one I'm thinking of, she's recently divorced after 40 plus years.
Oh, man.
Her husband ran the money so it sounded like she did in the beginning, so she knows how to do it. But obviously kids, I think she had 4 kids. He took over, which is fine, right? But then he became controlling about it.
Right.
Obviously that was why they ended up divorced. And so I'm like, hey, you knew how to do this in the beginning. It doesn't mean that you haven't now. And so as we worked, it was interesting because from session 1 to session 2, she kind of panicked because she has all control. Right. And so she's like, okay, I had no control. So she would spend to spite him. And now she has all control, and she panicked because what does that really mean? You know? And so trying to help her realize that she will feel more in control as she budgets, right? As she finds her focus with her goals and the direction she wants to take with life. She's she's later in the years, but not old by any means. But she's like, I want to do for my grandchildren, and I want to be able to do these things. And I'm like, then let's build it around that. And so that's what we've started doing. And so, it's just like helping her realize she can. And she goes to an energy worker, and the energy worker's like, you're so rigid, you're so scheduled, you've got to just let go and have fun.
Yeah.
So she went on a spending spree, and then she comes back and she's like, I realized what? And I said, hey, no, recognizing all of those emotions, right? Like, yeah, you probably need to, break free. So you went and spent on some home decor, which is fine, because then she says, oh crap, I shouldn't have done that, but that is okay. I will make it work. And so, segueing through all those emotions and realizing that we do have emotions. Right. Money creates emotion. And so processing it is twofold, right? We still need to stay logical with money, but we need to understand why we're having those emotions. Right. And so, just walking them through the process, it's not even about money management at that point. It is really about mindset.
Right.
And so she had corrected it herself. So it's just like, hey, you're doing great. The more times, the more experiences now, you're feeling free. You want to be free. I get that. Now you know that, okay, if I'm going to spend on home decor, it's going to come out of this budget. And you just make that choice,
Right.
And so, just showing them the different avenues of how they can handle all the things. So
right. Do you feel like women cope with shopping a lot now?
Yes, there's probably more so than not. I am not I hate shopping. I'm so funny, but when I do, I do go spend a lot. But I think that a lot of women. I had a girlfriend of mine. She's like, I just can't stop sometimes. But it's her. It's how she deals with her mom. And while that doesn't make any sense to me, I'm like, I totally understand it, right? Like, some people eat to deal with certain things. Right. Some people spend so it's just like trying to figure out what is the trigger, what is, if there is a limiting belief that they need to heal, and then just practicing that. Right. It just becomes, okay, try not to create the trigger. If you do, right, you got to have something to turn to separately. And, right, I know there was an individual, she would go with her group of girlfriends and they would spend all the things, buy all the things. That woman would go back the next day, return everything. She couldn't afford it, but she didn't want her friends to know.
Wow.
So I guess she was handling it, although I don't know, it's like peer pressure is so hard even as we grow older. Right. And so she'd resolved that she would just return it back. I probably would have just told them I'm not buying anything today, but we all work differently. And so we've got to find how we cope with that. So
yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's very interesting to see how people cope with their triggers, with their traumas, with things in their past. And I think being aware of spending money, or especially overspending, is usually highly connected to some type of trauma or some type of conditioning, or dealing with our parents that may have invoked that trauma or caused some of our pain and things like that. I feel like it's so important. Mm-hmm. It is so interesting to me how trauma impacts our lives, and how is trauma supposed to impact money? But it impacts everything. And so being aware that there's certain things that trigger us into overspending is going to be so important. And it's also important to know, and I used to do this a lot when I was younger, is like me and my friend, we would go have like a couple of drinks at the bar and then be like, okay, well, we needed to go to Target. Rather than going to Target first and then going to have drinks, we would go afterwards. And now you're spending all this money because you just don't care. You're like, this is a great time. Right. I'm in here shopping at Target. So there's certain things that we have to be aware of, our spending habits and why we're spending and what emotions are invoking that spending, and essentially how we can get those needs met somewhere else, because it really is about something else usually most of the time. So I feel like that's important. I love that women are seeing that, and we're helping women get through that, and especially you for helping them with their finances. What do you feel like is the biggest struggle for women as far as their money goes?
I think it is, number one, that they're trying to provide all the things for their kids. Mm. And so a lot of times that's what they're trying to keep up with is, well, my kids need this and I want to give them this. And while that is true, so we need a roof over our head, we need food to eat, we need, heat, cooling, all of those things. And then it's determined from there what you can provide for your kids. And I think this is where conversations with your kids can happen easier. So as a mom, we take on a lot of, well, I don't want my kids to feel bad, so I'm going to give them these things. Or I don't want to tell them no, because they really should go be on that, sports team or that dance team or whatever. While it's true, how are you going to help them understand that there's costs and needs that need to be met? And so my mom always allowed us, and I was the tail ender. There were 7 of us, but we were the tail ender. So there was not as many kids at home now, so we probably have it a little bit more. But even talking to my oldest sister, I think my parents still had the same regimen. We got one activity and one music. And so we just knew that we couldn't do all of the things. If we chose dance, we chose dance. And if, music, we chose music. And so I think women, we are pleasers, and pleasing people comes in showering with gifts. And I think women, while yes, we can shower gifts, we need to remember that we need to set our money boundaries, right? Yeah. So, okay, I would love to gift you something, but I just don't have that right now. So, maybe in 5 years, and if that is a true friendship or, family relationship, in 5 years, you'll be able to do that. So, try not to be as much of a pleaser to, number one, our kids, and number two, those friends and family that we feel like if we don't, then they're not going to get back in return. And that's a whole nother, that's a you coach, that's not a me coach. But I find that, I probably land with all coaches out there, right? Career coaches, all the things, it's all money. But, just recognizing your money boundaries. I tell people when we're creating a budget for them, I'm like, what is your priorities, Right. And so like this client of mine who wants to shower her grandkids with gifts, then I'm like, then make that your priority, but you're going to have to give up something else. So yeah, quit pleasing people to the extent you can't, that it's going to make you broke, because then you're not going to be happy. Right. They're going to be pleased, and what are you? So
yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought that up, because pleasing people and giving everything that we have to people there's obviously something else going on, but it is going to hurt us in the end, especially if you can't pay mortgage, or you can't pay the car payment, or pay the electricity bill. We don't want that. It shouldn't have to be. Helping people or pleasing people shouldn't be at the expense of whether or not you're going to be able to live by your needs or live comfortably. It should never be one way or the other. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's so important. So you do have a gift for everybody that's on here. I want to drop that. Tell us a little bit about the gift that you have left for everybody. I'm going to drop it into the link right now.
Okay. And I've got to remind myself which one. I just created a new one after I had sent this. Oh, okay. Yep. I remember which one this is.
Okay.
So, so as you're dropping that, so this is a guide to help you get a month ahead. So I just want to share a story. I was working with a client yesterday, and she's like, well, how do I know how I put my money in there? And I'm like, well, what bills are next to be paid? And so walking her through those steps. But I said, your ultimate goal is that your checks you receive in February are going to actually fund your March's bills. That's an ultimate goal. Now, you're not going to get there, this week or next week. It's going to take some time to build that. And that's what this guide suggests, is different ways to find that. And specifically in there is the tax return. So it's a one-time, this is not going to make a car payment. So, I mean, let me rephrase that. If you're looking at paying off your car with it, go for it. But it's not I can go get a new car because I have this much in a tax return. So, read through that. Tax return can help you build up that buffer. That's basically what we are doing, is building up a buffer so that we're not living the paycheck to paycheck or the month to month. We're not having to figure out, okay, so what bills come out of the first check and what bills come out of the second check. It just lessens that stress to go, okay, all of my paychecks this month are going to next month, and I can just pay my bills. I can set them up on auto pay, I can schedule them, or I can walk in and pay them however you want to do, and not have that stress and not have that worry. So I think there's some really good suggestions in there, and hopefully most of them people can apply. There might be a few that either you don't like, and they don't resonate with you, or they just are not applicable. But I think the majority of them will help you start figuring out how to get that month ahead.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I'm excited about that. Tell everybody how they can get a hold of you. I'll drop your Instagram link here, but let everybody know how they can get a hold of you if they want to talk about cash flow in their business, or they need help with budgeting or anything of the alike.
So yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram to learn a little bit more about me, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well under Dalene Higgins. So Instagram's under my business name, Elevate Finances. LinkedIn is under Dalene Higgins. You can also find me or all of the information on my website at elevatefinances.us. Every potential client goes through a free Q&A call. It's a 20-minute to discuss what your issues you're looking for help with, and I let you know, can I help you with that or not? Mm-hmm. And typically, if it's something I can't help you with, I hopefully have created enough, partners in this that I can refer you to somebody that can. So I would love for you to follow me on Instagram and get to know me better and see me in my crazy outfit that I had shared yesterday. But I'm getting a little more daring on sharing some of those funny things, but I'm a very logical person. So sometimes I come across too logical. But once you get to know me, I think there's some personality there. I can talk forever once I meet somebody, but I'm an introvert. Don't ask me to break the ice first. So, yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Before we wrap up, ladies, if you have any questions that you want to ask Dalene, please feel free to drop them. But in the meantime, Dalene, if you could only share one piece of advice for women around money, what would it be?
Go with your gut. Like, you have it in you. You know what you need to do. And then just learning to set those boundaries on the outside, right? You know inside what you need to do. So then actually putting those boundaries into place on the outside with individuals, that's where the work comes in. So
yeah, definitely. I love that. I was not expecting you to say go with your gut, especially because, things with money do seem like they are logical. Like everything has to be spelled out. There's a spreadsheet that we're supposed to follow. We have a budget. But I love that you said go with your gut, because we really do know what we need. And sometimes we're so afraid to listen to that inner guidance that is telling us, you need to pull back on spending for entertainment, or you do need to budget a little bit more, or, you need to watch what you're spending and stuff. And we feel like we don't know, but we truly do know. Sometimes we just don't listen.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Okay, so this was great. Thank you. Thank you for joining in, Angela and Floretta. I really appreciate it. But this is what we have for you. Make sure, I better actually drop that link. I'll drop it in later. But make sure that you apply or join for the virtual networking that is happening next week, because Dalene is going to give an exclusive teaching on that, and it will actually be all the logical pieces of it. So she's going to go over master your money skills. So make sure that if you want to get that exclusive teaching, that you join the virtual networking. It will be next week at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So make sure that you apply for that. I will drop the link in here again when we're done. But and it's also in the guides, so that you can check that out, and that way you can get that exclusive teaching. That will not be posted in the Facebook group. It will only be for those who show up live to that networking event. So make sure you check that out. And then Dalene will then do an hour of hot seat coaching the following week, which she will talk about all about money mindset and those things. So make sure that you stay tuned and show up for that, because I'm sure she would love to answer your questions around any money mindset things that you have. So make sure you continue to join us. I'm so excited to have her on here. And thank you everybody for showing up. And I hope that you have a great day. We'll see you later. Bye.